Yeah, we're fine. And welcome to the AI Exchange Authors Meeting, 21st of March. I don't know what time it is. It's something with daylight savings. We're 12 o'clock somewhere. That's for sure. But we're here. Just to avoid confusion with time zones, I intend to send out invites to, as Thomas suggested, Google Groups. So everybody will get something in their calendar, and that will automatically accommodate your time zone, so there can be no confusion as to the starting moment. Let's have a look at today's agenda. Since I can record, I probably can also share my screen, and we'll do so straight away. There we are. Meeting number 5. I have some updates from the trenches, an update on behalf of Sandy, who had a conflicting appointment. Question to John, any news? How's the book? I'm curious to learn. There's some slides that came in from our niche, who's working on the step-by-step guide. We had a meeting about that yesterday, so that's a hot topic for us to discuss. And then if time left, status discussion of teams and work items that we have. My updates, well, we onboarded Dennis, who was in the call today, Shenya, who was also in the call, Kasra, and Anmol, and they've introduced themselves into the authors channel and picked up work. I did a webinar. I was quite honored to represent OWASP in discussion with NIST and MITRE about AI security standardization. It's in the Slack channel if you wanna view it. I have given this group not the tender love and care that the group deserves, because I was working really hard on the ISO 27090 input, and actually produced 58 pages of contributions based on the AI Exchange content, organized in such a way that those are comments to the ISO AI security standard that's currently in committee draft form. And those comments will be processed by the working group. So yeah, there's a gap in the 27090 standard, in that we have a lot of content to fill it in. And that was one of the goals of the AI Exchange. And I'm happy that we're in a position to bring this in. As a side note, I'm also working on a book, just like many people, but this time is a children's book. That may sound easy, but it's not. But it's a lot of fun. It's something different. It's about AI, a children's book about AI, and some of the things that we believe that the future generation should be aware of. I was reviewing a report by the Alan Turing Institute on the challenges of AI security standardization, where our exchange also plays a role. And the fact, for example, that we have applied for what's called a liaison organization, which would make OWASP an organization that can be at the table of standard making with Sensenelec. So that means standard making for the European AI Act, for example. And we just have to wait one more week for the ballot for that to finish, and then hopefully we'll push through. But there is a chance that it will not push through, because people will think, oh, but this is, I don't know what this is. I'm going to say no. But I do think it is important to have, a good set of experts at the table when you're creating standards. There's a lack of that, and you want to mobilize expertise, and that's what we're doing. I'm working with an organization in Israel who also have noted that standard makers these days need help when it comes to AI standards and AI security standards. And we're working with governments and organizations to see if we can create sort of a yeah, a cross-continent group of experts who can join in on standard making. We're sort of exploring how to fix that problem, because we need to get this right. We cannot come up with low quality standards because the industry, the market will not accept it. So I was quite busy with that. That's why I have a backlog in working with several of the teams, like for example the step-by-step guide. I had a meeting with Aranish and with Marco yesterday. By the way, you can see the slide with the updates. Is that working? Okay. And we're making some good progress there. That's showing promise. Aranish will explain shortly. I'm working with Chloe. I just had a call with her, and with Rocky on the MITRE mapping. That's still in early stage. I need to review work by Banaz and Rubens, but also by Niklas, more on some data science controls. And Reza and team, they have worked on risk analysis, and I also need to review there. So I will pick up on that backlog in this period, between this meeting and the next meetings in the next 2 weeks, because I finally have some time to do that. I am, by the way, very happy that the 58 pages from the AI Exchange went into the to the ISO standard. I'm sure that not everything will be accepted, but definitely a good part of it. So that's a great accomplishment. Some contributions. There's a link here where you can see all the history of the content of the exchange. In the process of preparing the input to 27090, I did a lot of text improvements because, yeah, the text goes through your fingers in putting them into comments, and then you notice how things can improve. So that was sort of a dual purpose process. I re-added the old attack illustration diagrams. Let me show them to you. So if you go, for example, to threats through use, there are these little explanations of how an attack works with the perturbations and what the results are. It's just tiny diagrams, and I think we need more of them as we move forward. Not per se for the next version 1.0, but they are very helpful to get across a certain idea. We had them before, and I re-edited them. Took a bit of editing, but that's fine. Wrapping up, Dennis did some good additions on checking compliance by giving an overview of all kinds of relevant regulations. Very helpful, I think, to the reader. Also to see that there are, for example, apart from the AI Act, there is an AI liability regulation in the making. Could be a blind spot for many people. And also, of course, privacy regulation is relevant when you're working with AI, depending on the context. But there are many continents, there's many geos where there are different regulations relevant. There's a nice overview now ready to go into the exchange. It can be found in the Google Doc as a change. Matt Adams is a person who's not in the authors group, but he has done some contributions just on GitHub, and I thanked him for it. And he created a notebook with a database, and the database represents the navigator, which basically is how we store threats and controls and how they are related. So using this notebook, people can do analysis and create graphs, which controls and which threats are relevant depending on the situation. Super cool. I posted it on the author's Slack channel with the request of someone having a look at it to do some due diligence, because I'd like to spread the word on this, but I wouldn't like that this notebook does anything bad, if that is at all possible, to the user. So if you want to, please have a look and consider maybe taking this upon you by looking at the post in the author's Slack channel. We shifted working from GitHub to Google Doc. I I came to the realization that having to contribute and provide finished work can be daunting, because then you need to have the feeling that it's completely correct and, you know, camera ready to go into the exchange. And I guess that's too much to ask in some situations, which makes it less attractive, you know, to go to GitHub and say edit and make it better. A little bit scary, which is why I decided to put everything in our authors whiteboard Google Doc, the link that's in the authors channel description, because then it's easier for people to just put in blurbs, ideas, comments, small changes, and allowing everybody to review, and then we can move it in GitHub to the exchange. I'll make sure that that happens. It's just easier, it's less scary. We all suffer from imposter syndrome once in a while, and we need to appreciate that. Me too. So using Google Doc is simply easier. GitHub is, I think, typically better for, of course, open source projects where you're developing code. But documents and sharing ideas and parts of ideas is just better in Google Doc. Let's see how this goes. I talked about the OWASP liaison. To wrap up my updates, there's one more thing, which is I posted this on the authors Slack channel, which is a representation of a machine learning model, obviously, but with different trust boundaries. So you have your runtime, you have your train time, but typically you have a trusted environment in which you do your training, so you can do some checks and balances. There's a preparation time and there's a supplier. Not every attack, obviously, involves all these trust boundaries, but they are interesting to illustrate. And in this case, it shows all the different stages in which a training data poisoning can take place. And I think it's helpful for the reader to understand. So on Slack, I didn't get any reactions as to that we should not do this. Any reactions or questions from the group about this, using this diagram? The idea is to use sort of the core of this diagram for all the threats where trust boundaries are relevant, so that we can show, for example, in a supply chain attack, where the supply chain attack takes place, etc. Any responses?
I wholeheartedly agree with using threat modeling. I was going to mention it in my update, and my focus is that actually the feedback that I get from customers and people that I talk to is that the conversation is way above their ability to comprehend. So anything that's contextual and real and relates to what they do is actually welcome, rather than reams of pages that they don't have time to read and they don't have time to understand. So well done, that's really great. And I think, you know, we should carry on, and I'll cover some of that in my update on how to make it more contextual.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Just coming back from South by Southwest and discussing cutting edge federated systems and so forth with people, we need to bring the general security level understanding up. So something that simplifies like this, I think is incredibly helpful.
Cool. Anything about the colors or the wording that is off for anyone? I'm asking this because we're going to use this for multiple architectures and situations, and we better do it first time right.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is this going to be the standard for the diagrams? Because if so, that it looks good to me, but that will help me out if I'm making diagrams for stuff in the future.
All right, I'll make a note that I'll share this PowerPoint in the group then.
Ask a potentially silly question. What does training data to be supplied means?
So the top trust boundary is where the supplier is supplying training data. And before it is supplied, it is training data to be supplied. And in that stage, so let's say, for example, that you are a company that sells medical data for people to train their models on. While that data is in the control of that company, it can be poisoned, which means that some, malicious samples are added in either to sabotage the model that will later be trained on it, or to put in some triggers that will give false results to get a specific benefit depending on, the scenario. Does that make sense, Matthew?
I think so. If I was like a security officer or something like that, and I was saying this is my threat model, everything north of that training data being prepared is someone else's responsibility in a way. I mean, clearly it's my threat model, but like if I'm, it's what it's saying is the supplier gives me the data to do the training. So no, sorry, I don't want to derail things. I just
I think it would be good actually to have a conversation about how we represent, and I think I have some kind of views on that too, Rob. So maybe and I know you probably shared it on Slack, but I'll definitely have a look at that, because I have some views on too on kind of how do we denote the same attack but different context supplier and what means the responsibilities.
Nice. Okay.
Create those questions too. But that's it's kind of something to discuss more than anything. I don't have the answers in my head on this call, but definitely, I will go through and post.
All right. I see hands. I don't know. Aranish, maybe you first?
I think Desasdi had her hand first. So
Okay, sure, thank you. I'm curious to know exactly what you're meaning by like delineation of responsibility. So for data poisoning, from my perspective, from a mitigation standpoint, you'd want to have in your failure modes and effects analysis ranges that you check for your incoming data. So that's one defense. I'm not sure where that means responsibility lies, like from a CISO perspective. But there are mitigations that can be taken to, detect and prevent things like this at any stage.
I think it becomes a supply chain issue really, and you still need to safeguard it. But I think someone else had their hand up, so.
Aranish?
yeah, I mean, like maybe a few inputs on this one. Some might be more cosmetic. I think probably using a different color for each and every layer. Again, like this is not super critical. I think we can refine this as we go. Like I had like questions. So in case of a supplier or preparation time, I'm just want to take a hypothetical position on this. Let's say an organization is using a model that is pre-trained from and getting it from Hugging Face, for example, or maybe there is some other repository that's out there which they are consuming. So in that particular case, how do you account for those scenarios in this thread model itself? Because in that case, the supplier aspect is kind of missing. It's the data is already trained, right? So you kind of take it with a grain of salt that everything is sort of refined and is trusted, where it is not. So I just want to see like how we can actually reflect those kind of models, or rather that kind of a workflow in this diagram.
Yeah, the scenario where the training data is, I mean, the learning takes place somewhere else, then that layer of the training data poisoning, the layer where you see now machine learning becomes the supplier. And the responsibility between this one and this one is actually where you are need to apply supply chain management. And in order to make that clear, we might even need another layer that sort of integrates that prepared model. And I think that because of this complexity, we need, and I think it was also mentioned in the chat, different use cases with each their own threat model, because now it's sort of a catch-them-all picture where everything starts to blur, like you rightfully indicate. So it is a scenario where you're obtaining, training data, but there's also a scenario where you're obtaining a pre-trained model that needs to be drawn in a different way. So we'll need multiple threat models with the text probably.
That really talking about use cases, that I think
Yeah.
that why confusion at the start. What's the use case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge we always have. How do we create a reference? And that's the point I was making earlier on. So because we want to be ahead of the curve and capture concepts, we tend to be generalists. And we tend to create very generic documents that then people have to make that mental journey of interpreting it into what they do. So having some examples to show that, and again, I'm giving you my update, but I'll do it afterwards anyway, where you have some kind of, I don't know if you're old enough, kind of people had Contosos, and they had Sun Microsystems have the pet stores, kind of things that we don't need to go to that level of detail, but we need to have. If you don't mind, actually, Rob, I can start my update now, and then you can give. So
this is a good time.
Yeah, that's the stuff I'm writing, actually. We had a conversation on Slack the other day. So my view is that, as I said, and that's why I started this book, my book is on adversarial AI, and it's all about actually making people understand what we're talking about, because just because something is in a paper doesn't
Wait, John, wait, before you go further, I need to make you aware that this is recorded and we're going to put it on the website. And I know that some of the stuff that you're doing, is still under embargo. I just want you to be aware of that, okay?
Thank you. So what I was trying to say, and I've forgotten now, we're recording it actually. I think actually that's something that, yeah, you're right. We need to kind of pay more attention, which is how do we make this to the defenders and builders understand? And I really like, Rob, you started kind of illustrating that, or I can't remember who started talking about examples of showing what that means. And also when it comes to the threat model, yeah, it is kind of what I said. How can we have a couple of examples that show, kind of deployment of applications? It's a different, if you look at the biggest thing generative AI has brought, at least for now, is that it shifted everything back to APIs. And so, what's kind of the threat model there, and what is that people need to worry about?
Yeah.
Those kind of Sandy isn't the call, but she did some kind of good deployment scenarios for the LLM group. I think, if we had something like that expanded across the AI spectrum, and just kind of thinking loud now more than anything, we could actually relate this foundational threat model that you have there, Robin, and apply it to different use cases. And maybe many of us can collaborate on that and take different use cases. So that's my update, actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, we need to discuss in the group which scenarios to take. There is some of that in the exchange. If you look at the overview and then look at the threat model, there's the whole thing, but there's also the variation where we have using a generative AI model as is. I think that's a typical sort of deployment scenario where it's as is. So you need to do a couple of things, but the other responsibilities, they are with the supplier, but you do need to check them. And this is indeed an important thing for us to work on. I'll make a note of that.
And I actually built on that. You're absolutely right. There are some foundational stuff in there. We just need to, and a little bit listen to what people outside the group, our customer, if you like, say about how much they understand. So two other points on my update. I gave feedback. I was part of a roundtable. The UK is doing a consultation. The former security minister, I can't remember his name now, actually. He is doing an MP, McPartland. He's doing this review. And some that came out there was this, that we need to listen to people that use practitioners, cybersecurity practitioners, to make it as digestible as possible. Don't necessarily dilute the integrity of good science, but find those viewpoints that help people absorb it. And that's
Yeah.
kind of very clear. And that's me for today.
Great. When's the deadline for your book work?
The paper was my first draft, and then I have less intense, which will be editing and making sure. So, you know, the publication day is in June, but the main work is 10th of April was my deadline. So
10th of April. All right. Yeah. Good luck, man. Probably the toughest phase right now.
And one last one, sorry, I've forgotten. The NIST work that we're doing on the US safety, I've just got a list of people that I just got an email asking to confirm, and you will get a Slack invitation if you haven't. The consortium started, for those of you that joined, I've started sharing the plans, 3 streams that we're taking part: risk management, safety and security, and red teaming. So it will be good to see us being active there.
Cool. Yeah, this is such a cool initiative. I already shared this with John, but to share this also with the rest of you, I will not make use of the option to be part of some of the groups of the Safety Institutes Consortium, because I want to focus on the exchange and the directly related dependencies, like the AI Act and the 27090, and also the work for CSA that I committed to. So I don't have to neglect the AI exchange.
You can divide and conquer.
Yeah, indeed. So thanks for that. Thanks, John. That takes us to Sandy's update. She had a conflicting meeting, but
Right.
she would like us to know that.
Well,
Matthew?
sorry,
Yes.
I don't know how to find the hand up icon in the thing. So just to say, I do wonder if it's worth considering for the threat models as well, talking about training data and the like. If you look at frameworks like DISPy, I believe it's called now, there's a lot of programmatic efficiency creation on prompting that in my mind is very data. So going back to that Gen A, you know, using Gen AI as is, you've got this sort of layer below the actual training of the model where there's a large amount of data that's being stored, and for me that would be a target for poisoning as well.
Yes.
Sure if that's been discussed, but when I saw the diagram, I just thought of that as well.
All right. I think it's in scope. Well, I'll double check it. Ramesh.
Rob, just one quick thought on the threat model. Just from a standardization perspective and from a documentation perspective, why don't we use a standard threat model tool, something like an MTMT or an OWASP Threat Dragon? It will just maintain consistency on our documentation.
Yeah, and it will probably also use some of the typical DFD elements like the red dotted boundaries and stuff like that. So we can be how do you say, consistent with that standard. I like the idea. Yeah. Standard DFD tool in visualization. The diagrams that we'll make will be relatively simple, right?
Yeah.
No complex multiple component stuff. I think, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So Sandy shares with us that there were 60 new welcome emails sent for people who said we want to contribute to the AI exchange. So we have a nice pipeline of people to have a sort of an intake conversation and see if they want to contribute and how, and do that onboarding if everything's positive. So that's looking good. And this is Aranish part. He prepared a couple of slides. How much time do you need, Aranish, for this section?
I mean, I can wrap it up in like few minutes, or if we are having a discussion in the process, yeah. I mean, like just tell me what is the drop dead time for it to end, and I'll make sure we basic.
So it's 38 right now. I would say max 10 minutes.
Okay, fair enough.
Will that work? Okay.
Yeah. So before I go into this one, right, let me just give a little bit of background. So I presented at ISACA, Silicon Valley, around like a code generation, and most of the stuff that I presented kind of comes in line with like how do organizations really think of adopting AI within their organization in a safe and a secure manner, right? So when I was looking at the structure for the stuff, right, I think Rob, you also mentioned maybe it needs to be done in a way it's like consumable by any organization, big or small. So basically, what I'm talking about right now is more on a high level what the structure for the step-by-step guide would look like. And also, again, like this cannot be done in silo itself. Like I would, me, Marco, and other folks in the group would need to actually solicit feedback from people in their respective profession, whether somebody's coming from a legal like Dennis or somebody else who's a practitioner itself. So have like more of a collaborative approach to actually build it together. Again, like effort would go into actually build the guide together, but I think like in the process, reaching out to different people, whether it's Dennis, DisSD, Benaz, Dharmesh, so many people are on this particular forum, right? So coming back to the slide itself, purpose we talked about, make the guide consumable, easy to understand. I think that's going to be important once we go out to the industry, go out to like different organizations. It needs to be multi-purpose, applicable to multiple verticals, not just in healthcare or finance or any. It needs to be applicable for multiple domains. And how do we plan to do this? Again, most of the work is already in there, is definitely identifying the needs for the organization and define key characteristics, right? Like establishing like a governance board, a steering committee, defining the use cases that we were talking about a few minutes ago, like use cases and also threat model around that one, GRC around that one, identifying the risk, mitigation controls, incident response, how do you monitor the program and the rollout itself, right? And again, this is my thought process. Again, like we can actually course correct this one, is looking at running this particular guide through the SME within the author group or the OWASP wider community. And once we have initial feedback on that, take it to some pilot organization which are willing to actually provide feedback as a testing ground. Is it practical? Are there any tweaks that needs to be done, right? Next slide.
Yeah, in our preparation, you also talked about handy things like appointing people, giving them roles, giving them responsibilities in an organization, just to make it, tangible for a board. How to make this happen, because we can say you need to have an AI program, but of course you need to arrange a couple of things. That's what the step-by-step guide is about, right?
Yeah, precisely. So I think like from a building block perspective of this one, right? There are like maybe 7, 8 different functional areas that's going to be important, right? First of all, defining the use cases and exactly identify how it's going to be used. Do you see like ROI on this one, right? So I think that's where your business folks would come in, your technical folks would come in, right? To define, okay, this is what I'm looking to build, and this is how it's going to be built. And these are the realized value for our investment, right? So defining the use case is going to be important for organization. Establishing the steer co within the organization, which is a very practical thing to do in any organization these days, right? To ensure you have folks from business, folks from legal, compliance, tech, operations are all part of this group itself. And what it leads towards is the GRC aspect, right? Where you're understanding the risk, you're creating like some sort of risk catalog. Okay, these are the risks that we realize we have, and according to those risks, you're going to put like guardrails and controls to prevent those things. We talked about some of these things a few minutes ago around like threat modeling this one, right? So I think those things would come in very, very handy. I included like incident response just to ensure there is coverage on that one. That's something that we didn't discuss yesterday, but I think the IR aspect might be an important aspect for organization to think through. Like if something goes wrong, for example, right? You have like a DDoS or like model has been like changed or something malicious happening, right? So having some sort of a planned response is going to be important. A phased rollout is a good strategy to say, okay, we're going to roll out only to a pilot set of users, or maybe do like A/B testing when we are rolling out new features, for example, right? And the last one is like monitoring. And maybe there is a ninth box that we can actually populate. But I think from my perspective, these are like the 8 functional blocks that's going to be important from an adoption perspective. The next slide would actually kind of go into a little depth, but any questions on slide number 7 or any inputs?
I appreciate the incident response one in particular because I haven't seen a lot of focus on that in industry whatsoever. So we will be on the bleeding edge if we can give some sort of somewhat comprehensive guide there.
Yeah, I'm going to cover that one in a moment, but thanks, Desesti. You just signed up for the IR as an IR reviewer.
Be careful what you say.
Oh boy.
Yeah. No, but you're right.
Okay. So we talked about the use cases. Have the use cases clearly been articulated? What are the timelines organization are aiming for? I think that's going to be important for, let's say, somebody wants to be ready with AI adoption by end of the year, right? It's going to be important to realize, okay, the timelines, and it would define how much involvement you need from different teams, how much risk they're going to take if something is not like 100% accurate. How are organizations planning to embrace AI within their existing process, existing business, or maybe they're going into a new line of business? What kind of models are going to be used? What domains, what verticals are we looking at? Chatbots, trading application, healthcare, RPA, code generation. I think all these things need to be like clearly defined. And what I see in the industry, I think the focus is more on the chatbot and code generation. I think the other use cases are kind of getting defined real. I think it's more of a vendor adoption that I see most of the time, but I think from a step-by-step guide, when you're looking at integrating AI into your own organization, it's going to be important to actually lay out what exactly you're trying to do and put like a book of work, which is very, very detailed. Any question? One quick question on this slide, anyone?
One remark, let's be aware that we do not spend too much words on things outside of security. I mean, it's good to touch on these elements, the use cases, etc. If we would be writing a generic AI readiness starting plan for organizations, we would have a bunch of sample use cases. But for the purpose of this being part of the AI exchange, we need to sort of restrain ourselves a little bit and make sure that the people see the whole, but we don't go into a lot of detail if it's not about security. Does it make sense?
Yeah. And the intent is the initial overview and the initial section is going to be very light touch on the use cases, but giving some samples, but not in details. It's probably going to be like a half pager at most.
Good.
Next slide. Again, these are the key characteristics for any adoption guide, whether it's AI or something else. We kind of covered most of this. One thing that I want to highlight here is like awareness training, which is aware. I mean, like aware of the latest trends, threat landscape, risk catalog is going to be important. Having understanding of the regulation that the organization needs to be aligned with based on the vertical or the jurisdiction. Having a focus on controls and guardrails. And the last 3 we kind of talked about the rollout, the monitoring aspect, and the IR phase of this. Next slide. So these would be like some of the applicable risks. Again, this might not be comprehensive enough. And I think like when we talk about this one, I'm also thinking of like cross-referencing some of the work that's already being done instead of duplicating that one. We'll probably use like a lot of like hyperlinks within this document to something else, which is already a section on that one, right? So that we don't have to dual key that information and try to maintain it in 2 different areas. So again, like AI security, prompt read, prompt injection, no guardrails, bias, shadow IT, data poisoning, model theft. I think that this list needs to be very comprehensive, and I think like most of the work is already in place. I think we just need to expand on this one. What I expect the step-by-step guide to is identify these particular risks, and all of these would cross-reference a section in the other documents also to get like a deeper dive into those sections.
It's interesting. What is the difference between the list of risks that follow from the AI exchange, which basically is all threats, plus all the missing controls, because that's quite a long list, and this list? What is the selection process?
I think this is not very refined. This is me thinking out loud. But I think as we go defining the step-by-step guide, there needs to be a rationalization of what we include, what is kind of assumed in some other category itself. But this is like thinking out loud of what I perceive as risk as on day 0, for example, right? And as we go through this particular motion and then try working it up, this list might be much shorter or much bigger.
Yeah. Of course, we need to talk about risks in the step-by-step guide. What we need to avoid, I think, is to have a discussion of risk, organizing it by different principles than the exchange organizes them, unless it's useful for the step-by-step guide. But let's not fall into the trap of creating sort of a risk taxonomy, because that's what we're supposed to have in the AI exchange. Well,
Yeah, in fact,
we'll find out.
Yeah. Again, this is very, very like rudimentary. Just talking about, okay, this is what these are like some, I would say like these are more examples, and in the process, it needs to correlate to something that's already out there, right? And I'm pretty sure all these would be bucketed into some risk categorization, which already exists in a different guide altogether. And in fact, I had like one conversation with Behnaz yesterday, or maybe day before yesterday. So I'm going to speak more on this one with her and a few other folks. Hopefully, when this is kind of like in a decent state, but time on the actual risk aspect also. And the next slide, I know we only have, actually we are at time. So these are like some of the mitigation controls, guardrails again. Again, my thought process, it would be definitely be refined. One important point, symlink to having symlink to existing documentation to avoid duplication and any duplicated effort is going to be important. Thread modeling that we kind of talked about earlier. And I think like having a thread modeling against the use case would be a good place to cross-reference. What models are being used, data privacy protections, testing A/B, expanded awareness training, defining use policies within the organization, controlled rollout. These are like different things that organization would typically need to do to ensure they're actually leveraging and embracing AI securely. And I think the focus is mainly going to be on the security, not just in the other parts, right? It's like everything that guide would do is focusing on the privacy and the security risks. I think that was the last one.
All right. Again, also here with the mitigations and guardrails, it's important to be conscious of what's already in the exchange. See how we can sort of maybe add even detail. Like, for example, you mentioned awareness training. If it's about security, it should follow from the existing security awareness training. But if it's about responsible AI use, that's something else. That's an important thing to mention separately. Yeah, we'll find out while working on this. Who's your group currently, Amish?
I mean, right now it's me and Marco has limited cycles. And one of the reasons why I want to do this one is also like try to engage few other folks who are interested. And on the back end of this one, I'm also interacting with individuals one-on-one, trying to see where they come from and where they can actually add value in this particular thing, and where I can actually lend my value in other areas. Like red teaming is another area that I would be very keen. So I think I'm trying to build those relations, and if folks are interested, who have the cycles, definitely we can collaborate on this one. But so what I'm planning to do is like have iterations, sprints every 2 weeks, where we are churning out like some sizable outcomes and deliverables.
And you need people who have affinity with organization change, processes, and of course, clear writing. How do you want to? Oh, John, you need to go. All right. Thanks for setting this up. Good luck with writing.
See you guys and see you soon. Thanks, Rob.
Cheers, man. I see a hand by Damesh.
Yes. So Arunish, so firstly, I mean, this looks good, and please count me in for anything that you need help with. Just one question, right? Since this will be more, if I'm looking at this more from an adoption guide, right? Do you want to include a section somewhere like a RACI matrix kind of a thing, where, even that if it's like a change management process, who and all actors or systems in the whole process should be involved?
Yeah, in fact, if you go to the guide itself at the top section, there is a reference for R&R, roles and responsibility, from a RACI model. But
Right.
I'd love to actually get some more feedback since you asked that question itself. We can definitely build it in a very comprehensive fashion, right?
Got it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for offering help, Dharmesh. Arunish, I invite you to put a call on the author Slack channel to describe what you're doing, refer to this recording, and say that people who are interested to join in can join the. No, I think you are part of that project AI step by step, so you can add people to it. The reason that we're using sort of closed Slack channels is that, well, we believe in divide and conquer, but also in a controlled fashion, right? There's a certain group has a certain momentum. If you want to add people, that needs to be decided by the group. It's not that we don't want people to apply and help, but it's good if that goes into a controlled process. I hope that you find it fair. Thanks, Arunish. I have full confidence in you in spearheading this. And there's a couple of minutes left. I would like to open the floor if there are any business things that you would like to share, issues, questions, suggestions from the group here. Okay, Roger, thanks for joining.
I'm back. I'm back from having to be absent for quite some time due to MVP product launch and traveling and a bunch of IP stuff that's done. So I'm looking forward to jumping back in. I'm happy to help with the IR situation, Arunish, and any other ops processes. I think you can drop that in the chat. And I'm very excited about this because I just got the patent filing receipt back for a federated security system. Well, it was super fun working on that, writing the federated standards. So I want to do a post about that if y'all think it would be cool to do that, and just because I think it drives home that we're all in the trenches working in industry while we're contributing to this. So I'm totally open to suggestions on that, but that's my little humble brag that I'm super stoked about. And I'm looking forward to jumping back in and getting back to work here.
It's great to have you back. I hope you had a great adventure. You already have patents, don't you?
I've assisted on 9 or 10 patents, but this is the first one that I'm getting my name on that I know of. There were some that, I don't know, may have been published, but I haven't been keeping track. But to my knowledge, this is the first one that I've done the main thrust of the security design work on. So yeah,
Cool.
I'm pretty excited. Thank you.
And thanks to you, we have a great section on federated learning. It's 1.0 ready. You're currently on your plate is the NIST a sanity check, and you told me that you're picking up on that, so that's great. So please know, Aranish, that Susanna is available for incident response and any ops processes in your step-by-step guide. And Dennis, you made some contributions. Is there something that you set your eye on to further contribute? Is there any topic you'd like to pick up?
Hi, Rob. I mean, yes, like first, Aranish, walking through your step-by-step guide, I definitely see from legal, especially with use cases and potentially accountability topics for CISOs that is directly security related. I see some legal experience from my prior roles that I think may be of interest, at least to highlight on a very macro level for some of the audiences that will be reading this. So happy to continue to contribute in that respect, and then any other areas that people think there might be, there might be topics that, again, I don't want to derail anything with legal per se, but having worked and continue to work in cybersec and with a lot of engineers and devs, especially in AI, and watching it grow in my previous employer in a very regulated field, and having written guidance on security, I definitely hope I can continue to contribute if time permits. So yeah,
great.
So.
There's one topic that I would like you to consider writing something about, which is the issue of the copyright cases against the large models. What people can sort of how they should see this as a threat, perhaps if they're generating content themselves. Do they at some point perhaps need to throw it away? How will this go? So what are the best practices, and what is the actual situation right now with these copyright allegations? Is that something for you?
Definitely, I have plenty of colleagues in my network who are in this field as well. It's a wild west when it comes to AI, copyright, and IP in general. It's completely all over the place, unfortunately. So it's definitely something I can talk about in writing. Doesn't necessarily will say have definitive answers, but at least put up red flags and considerations, because it's a very much evolving field and will continue to be so for quite some time, until a lot of regs get their heads around it.
Yeah, just 2-3 paragraphs on it, just some perspective and a reference. You can argue if it's a security problem or not, but it's quite similar to sensitive data being in training data and exposed. I think as a threat, of course, legally it's quite different, but it is a thing that is on people's minds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I've learned in my work that we're all intertwined. It legally gets siloed too many times, but true legal and in-house should work very closely with security and engineers and devs and other teams, because at the end of the day, security can impact the entire organization's function and form. So yeah, happy to do so. I'll put something together. I'll share it internally in our authors channel for everyone to take a look at.
Thank you, Dennis. That takes us beyond the hour. I'd like to thank you for joining. We'll see each other on Slack. Let me know, or let Sandy know, if there are any impediments or any questions or things that you need to go ahead, or if you're taking a break. Everything's fine. Just let's stay in touch and make this thing better and better. And with that, have a nice one. Until
Thanks,
next time.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.